Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Sikich Live this week. And this week we're doing a little something special as we all head into a longer holiday week. And we are going to be replaying one of our Let Me Interject specials. This time we're going to be talking about mainframe madness. Essentially, a lot of companies are still running old terminal mainframe systems, and we're going to explore some of the reasons why they do that and some of the alternatives that they could choose. So enjoy this replay. And everybody enjoy their long weekend.
Hello and welcome to Let Me Interject. I'm your host, Nicole Adams, and today we're talking about moving from old legacy mainframe solutions like AS400 to Dynamics 365 Cloud. Joining me today, we have Lee House, Enterprise Sales Director and Partner here at Sikich. He's our Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations expert. And we also have Tim Tucker, who is Director of Professional Services for Dynamics 365 Business Central. Thank you both for joining us today. So let's go ahead and just jump into the questions and get started here.
Let's go.
All right. How often do you all come across companies that are running these legacy mainframe solutions?
Yeah, Tim, I'll let you go first there.
Yeah, it happens more often than you might think. There's quite a few people running old AS400 iron, other mid-range systems like that. I wouldn't say it's the most prevalent thing we run into, but it's surprising how many companies are still running on hardware that they bought 20 years ago, just because the thing was so reliable. It runs forever. So we've actually have a couple of projects right now that we're working on where we're working on pulling people off of that hardware, those old systems.
Yeah, I'd echo what Tim said. I mean, it happens a lot, and typically when we're getting involved with accounts, it's because they're looking to make some type of a move. And I'd say at least half the time they're on some type of legacy system, whether it's an AS400 or some type of a Unix environment. And they're looking to make the move for a number of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into, but it happens all the time. And like again, just to extend on what Tim said, I mean, we've got a number of projects where we're actually going through transitions right now.
Wow. So why are these companies staying on these solutions for so long?
Well, one of the reasons, like I just said, is they're like diesel trucks. They just run and run and run and run. In some cases, it may have been a fairly sizable investment that they made. These platforms were not cheap when they purchased them, and the investment that it made for the other systems to go along with them, backup servers and all that stuff. It's a pretty sizable investment. And then if they hired or had programmers come in and build them a custom solution, which we see fairly regularly, a custom ERP solution built on, for example, RPG running on an AS400, that's a pretty sizable investment as well. And so as long as they can continue to run their business on it and it's just plugging away, doing its thing, it's not viewed as a problem necessarily until it is a problem, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds pricey.
Yeah, they are. And Tim's right. I mean, look, so there's obviously been a big technological shift over the last 20 years, and really it's accelerated over the last 10, where companies' adoption of the cloud has become a lot more prevalent. But when you go back and you look when a lot of companies were buying these AS400s and again other platforms, that was all on-premise days. And so it was a huge capital investment for those companies when they would invest in those solutions. And when you look at it, they put the systems in, they run and run and run. But if you look at it from a financial standpoint, again, it was a big capital expense. The organization took that cost, they spread it over multiple years from a depreciation standpoint, and in a lot of cases they're well outside of that. So it's just there. I mean, it's not really an expense for them anymore, other than just operating it and the ongoing maintenance side of things. So a lot of companies have just been like, hey, you know what? I've made the investment. Why make a change? But again, there's a shift. There's a shift in, workers now, which is leading a lot of people to consider things like that.
Are
And
you?
consider it's not just the investment in the equipment itself. It's in the it could be in the entire server rooms that go along with it. You know, halon fire extinguishing systems. You know, all that investment in the data center is sizable.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so there's certain industries that have adopted these mainframe solutions over others, or that you run into more often than not that have these solutions versus other industries that might be more prone to moving to more modern or cloud solutions.
Yeah, I'll jump on this one first. I mean, it's you know where we see a lot of these solutions used is in organizations with real high transaction volume. So they've got real high processing needs. So think businesses where there's lots of orders that are processed, or think business where there's just complex things that they're doing that requires a lot of horsepower. So that's where we see a lot of that.
I'll give you a couple of examples piggybacking on what Lee said. One of the clients that we're working on right now is an example of a high transaction volume. It's a fairly sizable supermarket operation, and they've got an AS400 right now. And, they've got significant transaction volume that they're dealing with. Other areas where we've seen it is kind of that mid tier of company that may be multi locations, multi companies. But they have a centralized, mid-range type platform like an AS400 or Unisys or something like that, processing their orders or transactions, whatever the case may be.
So why are we suggesting that companies move off of these mainframe systems and to more of a postmodern ERP solution?
Yeah, Tim, go.
Yeah, so a couple of things we're seeing. One is that, as the hardware ages, you're faced with a choice. What do you do? And so people start looking at their options. But the other thing that we're seeing is, in cases where a system was put in, software was put in to go along with the hardware. And it's not just about the hardware, it's about the whole system. The people that wrote the RPG programs, the green screen stuff, aren't around anymore, or they're retiring. And so who's going to work on that? There aren't any. It's not like there's a plethora of programmers knocking down our doors that want to do RPG programming anymore, right? So it's a business continuity issue. It becomes a business continuity issue. The other thing is, the modern workforce doesn't want to work on these systems either. You look at people coming out of colleges and looking at their options of where, what types of companies they want to look for, and the systems and tools that you have to work for are an important part of the choice that people make. So that's one of the reasons. There's several others. Lee, you want to give a few more?
Yeah, it's I'll take a little bit different angle, but it kind of marries to what Tim just said. One of the things that we really do is we have conversations with companies, and we ask a lot of whys. Why are you looking to make a change? And we get a variety of answers. Because change is difficult for companies, and there's got to be a reason to make the change. And I've heard stories that literally I was with a company that's just under $1 billion in revenue, and was talking to the CFO, and he said, we've got one guy that knows the system, and if he gets hit by a bus, we're in big time trouble. And that was literally what the CFO told me. I was floored by that. It's not like it was a small company, so they had no contingency plan in place. So that's why they were looking to make a change. I've heard more and more something that Tim just said, where you're talking with chief executive level officers in a business, and they're challenged with that next generation worker and bringing them in. And there's expectations that these young people have coming out of college because they've grown up with technology. And the last thing they want to do is step into a green screen environment, or an environment that's nothing more than a scraped green screen type of a situation. Right. So that's a big deal. And a lot of these companies, candidly, their workforce is not only from a skill set of working technically with the RPG is starting to get closer to retirement, but the hands-on workers, transactional workers, are getting closer to retirement too. So the companies need to continue to have a plan in place to maintain their business. So that human capital thing is a really, really big issue that we've heard.
Interesting. And so is it usually it's usually the top executives that are realizing this, or are you finding that it's kind of coming up through the ranks up from more of a mid-level decision maker looking around?
I think it comes from both sides.
Okay.
It's I mean, a lot of it is going to be dependent upon the company that you're dealing with and how close the C levels are to that kind of stuff. Some of the C levels are going to be hearing it from their team, whereas some C levels are more in tune with what's going on from an industry standpoint, and they're reading the trade rags. More importantly, what they're doing is they're talking to their peers in the industry that are all facing the exact same issues. So they're getting a lot of the same feedback from those people also.
Okay. So the companies we're really talking about here have likely been running the same solution for the last 15 to 20 years. I think we mentioned that before. And I think you've touched on some of the things, but what's really changed as far as business applications are concerned over that time frame? Specifically within the last 5 years, I think there's been a real change in where these solutions are going.
Well, if you just look at the latest trends with the push to the cloud, and the power of the cloud, the power of computing at cloud level, cloud scalability. You look at the investment that companies like Microsoft have made into a whole ecosystems of business systems. It's not just about finance and accounting, but it's the whole sales process, your office productivity, handheld applications. That's trends that you just can't take advantage of if you're stuck in something that's 20 years old.
Mm.
Yeah, same thing, right? I mean, there's so many advantages for businesses to go to the cloud, right? So, I mean, there's operational cost, not only from just the expense of maintaining the hardware, like the physical hardware and the server rooms that Tim was talking about a little bit earlier, but the company is responsible from a human capital standpoint to maintain all that as well. So with the advent of the cloud and organizations, the publishers that are providing cloud applications, they're doing a lot of that heavy lifting. So that burden is taken off of off the customers. And in a lot of cases, you say 10, 15, 20 years. And in a lot of cases, these companies have been using these systems 20, 30 plus years even. And with them, what they've got in a lot of instances is a cobbled together system. So, ERP as an overall platform has evolved, during that time to do a lot of the things that Tim just mentioned, where it's much more integrated. There's a much richer feature set that comes within the applications. Whereas those companies that were, buying these solutions 20 to 30 years ago were buying best of breed, warehouse management, best of breed order processing, best of breed financials, and marrying them all together. And the solutions today, they have it all. And you marry that with the fact that it's in the cloud, it makes it faster to deploy. You can get your hands on it quicker, and then the overall ongoing cost. I mean, it's really leading a lot of people to consider the cloud as an option.
You mentioned these cobbled together systems. Is visibility just into overall business operations a real concern or challenge for these customers that are on these cobbled solutions typically?
Yeah, I'll jump into that first, Tim. I know you'll have some stuff to add. If you look at an ERP solution, and this is something that we tell people all the time, an ERP solution is really about two things. Number one, it's about providing data in an informational manner to the employees of a company so that they can quickly make effective decisions. So, and with a cobbled together system, you're going to have more challenges with that. And the other thing a great ERP solution should help with is exception management. If you look at a business and an ERP is deployed the right way, it should operate 90% of the business, no problem at all. It's the time gremlins that pop up every day that take up so much of people's time. And you have a good ERP that's deployed right, it will help you to manage through those exceptions, which will lead to you operating more efficiently, which will lead to you servicing your clients more efficiently. and ultimately it'll just lead to more, company success. And with those cobbled together solutions, when those exceptions come up, you have to go look in multiple solutions to try to identify, what the problem was, or to identify, the matter at hand. I mean, it's just compounded, when you've got those old legacy solutions.
Yeah, and then you take that from a practical matter and say, okay, what if I just want to have a really nice, business intelligence or rich reporting in my company? How do you do that with a bunch of cobbled together systems? Well, you can, but it becomes a technical nightmare, and then you're paying a bunch of data analysts and developers and database guys to try to bring all kinds of dissimilar data together, just so you can make sense of all the data that exists in all these systems. And with a well-designed ERP, the business intelligence, the operational reporting is just a natural outcome of that system, and so you don't have those types of problems. And people did try to accomplish this with these cobbled together systems in the years past, but there was such a huge technical debt and technical burden to continue to keep it going and make it work. In a lot of cases, those projects failed just because it was too complicated and too costly. And we don't see that happening with a modern ERP. Couple that with the power of the cloud, computing at cloud levels, and you don't have all of the hardware infrastructure necessary to run it either.
Now, Lee, you just mentioned exceptions. So honestly, right now, as we're filming this, we are all on basically government lockdown to some extent, form or another,
Yeah.
with this coronavirus outbreak. I mean, is this kind of an exception that maybe a more modern ERP solution would be able to help these customers with, or?
Yeah, you could run a parallel there for sure. I mean, the exception that relates to the specific scenario that you just painted there is with these modern ERP solutions, and the fact that literally all you need is a browser to access the application. You're at home, you've got internet connection and a browser, and it's set up right, and you've got security is maintained at the application level, from these companies that are investing and betting their business on the cloud. Companies can transition to this exception, if you will, much more seamlessly than a company that's using an on-prem product that might be using some type of a Citrix or terminal services type application to replicate a thin client. Companies are going to have a much more easy time adjusting to where we're at right now, for sure.
It's one thing to think about it from a facilitating remote workers or a home type of situation like we are right now, but the other thing to not forget about is modern ERPs also enable handheld solutions, and a lot of businesses are still having to send workers to the offices, distribution centers for food, groceries, supplies. You've got workers in warehousing, for example, that have a need for this new term social distancing to do that.
Right.
But if you're in an environment where you have legacy systems or no systems, and you're dealing with a lot of paperwork, a lot of handoff from person to person contact, that social distancing becomes a problem in people that have to come to work. Whereas if you're in a handheld situation where you've got, your phone or whatever your device is, telling you where to go get goods, pick it off the shelves and go, deliver to another station where somebody else can then come as you leave and pick it up and go from there. You can facilitate more of a social distancing type of situation for those types of workers as well. And that's the part that people forget about. What about those people that do have to go to environments where there's lots of people? How could technology assist and help protect those workers as well?
Yeah.
Right. That's really great. I didn't think that.
Well, I mean, and the fun thing about these cloud apps, I mean, really at the end of the day, you need a phone. I mean,
Right.
Tim and I, we get to the apps that we work with our customers on our phones, and again, that next generation where I like looking at a PC still, right? But our kids, who are, at it around college age, they do everything on their phones. And, again, these hosted cloud-based solutions, that makes that footprint just I mean, it's just secondary. It's just a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget to tune in next week as we continue our discussion.